What's the biggest violation of all this?
That I made it clear that this was a thing that was harming me. And people wouldn't even take me seriously about that. They would tell me I wasn't taking responsibility for my behavior, when I was denying something that was an outright lie from a parent who had been documented telling outright lies before this. I had been told that forever I was going to have to be on drugs that I couldn't stand, and most importantly that I couldn't say no now. So I was telling people that they were doing me harm, and I was offering them the entire way it was happening. But rather than inquiring about what I might be trying to tell them, they decided that that was a manifestation of my illness. I was paranoid to believe I was being hurt by them. And ironically, I just thought they were idiots. I didn't think they were malicious. They were just my mom's stooges who were using force. And I tried to tell them that. In fact, they acknowledge I tried to tell them that. But they kept doing it anyways. So the biggest violation isn't so much that they thought, using a 2x4 on me would be a good idea. It's that I explained to them exactly what they were doing. And they were uninterested in acknowledging it, looking into it, or even giving it a second moment's thought. And to those of you who treated me, especially Mr. Shearer, history will judge you. I don't know, maybe that's a little grandiose and should be cut, but I like it.
I'm laughing because when people make these kinds of statements throughout it, we've consistently said things like, oh, well, maybe that sounds delusional, or maybe that sounds paranoid, or maybe that sounds grandiose, and give it to them. But it's interesting how people recount this experience of what happens in the environment, particularly in the psychological environment, of how people are taken away from themselves. Within all of the environments that you were, I mean, at 14, did it end there, or were there...
Oh, God, no. Okay, so this was Centennial Peaks, and I was discharged from Centennial Peaks against medical advice for fiscal reasons, which meant I was not discharged to AMA, I was discharged properly. But I was discharged actually to... My mom didn't come to pick me up at the hospital when I was discharged, because they were out of money. I was actually picked up at the hospital by Dan Shearer, who was the family and community team therapist. And I'm not going to name my first psychiatrist, mostly because I intend for this to be a record of crimes against humanity, and while my first psychiatrist may have made some mistakes, I do not consider him to be guilty of such a thing. I'm not even going to name the psychiatrist at Centennial Peaks for one critical reason. I went back to her, and I told her about what had been happening, and I described the incident with a takedown, and what that had done, and you know what she said to me? I can see that we hurt you, and I'm sorry. I have no grudge against this person. I'm going to name Dan Shearer. But he picked me up at the hospital. I got set up with the school, because of course, the whole part of what had led to these multiple repeat hospitalizations, of course, was after my mom told a lie. Pretty much all I was interested in was every time people would tell me I was sick and I needed to acknowledge these things, I would say, wait a minute, part of your contention is based on false data. You're basing this opinion on a lie, and until that's been dispensed with, I'm not going to take you seriously. But unfortunately, in meetings at the school, it was me and my mom. So my mom would be a mother, and she would third person in front of me, dote, and tell them all about my sick ass. And I would try and refute it, but, she was abusing me in multiple ways, physically as well as the Munchausen's by proxy. So, consequently, they all saw an emotional, out-of-control child in these meetings, instead of a battered child. And that just reinforced the shit she was telling them. So, no one listened. No one ever listened. And I told them what my mother was doing. I told them the name of the report which proved it, and for years I was subjected to treatment anyways against my will, and they never looked for the report. I told them that the neuroleptics were harmful and that they were hurting me. And I think the usual description of my position on the matter that they gave was that my drugs were poisoning me. And, you know, if you change my words from, I am being subjectively harmed by this drug because the experience of it is unpleasant, to, let's see how much we can make this sound like a standard schizophrenic delusion, you know, yeah, I can see how maybe they were just trying to fit it into their worldview, but, you know, if you want a violation, forget the restraints, forget the locks, forget everything. It was not listening as I spoke, and having the arrogance to call my words meaningless. That was the deepest violation, and that is very deeply on some hands.
Have you healed from that?
After a fashion, I suppose. You're never exactly the same as you were before, but I would like to think that I'm a lot more awesome.